Welcome to Alien's Shadow. If you love epic sci-fi stories where humanity shines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for thrilling HFY adventures. Join us and be part of the journey. The cold bargain Zareth 12 was not a kind world. It was dry in the day, frozen at night, and the air always smelled of smoke and old war. Humans had come here to build a small colony, far away from the fighting zones. They made tall fences and watchtowers trying to stay safe. But sometimes, things still came out of the wild. One cold evening, the gate guard saw a strange figure standing at the edge of the woods. A woman, tall and thin, with white hair and pale skin, her arms wrapped tightly around a small girl, maybe 5 years old. The guard raised his weapon. Alert, the woman didn't run. Instead, she walked slowly toward the gate, step by step. She was shaking, not from fear but from cold, hunger, and something deeper, desperation. Her name was Hilary. She used to live in a shining city with her people, the Lurelians. They were proud and beautiful, known for their glowing skin and silver eyes. But now, her city was gone, destroyed in the last war. Her people were scattered or dead. All she had left was her daughter, Ara, a weak, thin child who hadn't eaten properly in days. Hilary had tried to steal, to beg, but no one helped. Everyone turned their backs, afraid of trouble. Now, standing in front of the human gate, she made her final choice. She knelt slowly on the frozen ground, ignoring the sharp pain in her knees. The guard stared at her in silence, unsure what she was doing. With a trembling voice, Hilary whispered, "Just one night with me. Feed my daughter." The wind stopped for a moment, like even nature was shocked. The guard, a man named Mason, lowered his weapon slightly. He looked at the child first, her eyes empty, her lips dry, her small hands gripping her mother's arm like a lifeline. "You're not a slave," Mason said quietly. "We don't do that here." Hilary looked up slowly, confused. "Then, why would you help us?" "Because your daughter's still breathing," he said, "and no child should starve." He opened the gate and stepped aside. Hilary hesitated, still not trusting it, but Ara's weak whimper pushed her forward. They entered the colony, a place of steel and machines. Warm lights glowed from buildings, and a few humans stared from windows. Some looked curious, some looked afraid, others simply turned away. Mason led them into a small room near the wall. There was a heater, a bed, and a small table with leftover food packets. He handed Hilary a blanket and pointed at the stew pot. "Let her eat," he said. "No questions, no trade." Hilary helped Ara sit down. She picked up the spoon with shaking hands and fed her daughter. The child cried as she ate, but the tears were soft, quiet. Full of relief, Mason stood near the door, arms crossed, watching them. He didn't smile, didn't speak more than needed. But he didn't leave either. When Ara finished eating, she curled into the blanket and fell asleep quickly. Hilary stared at her daughter for a long time, then looked at the human again. "You gave us food, warmth, safety," she said. "Why?" Mason shrugged. "I was a soldier once," he said. "I saw too many kids die. One more is too many." "Do you want something from me later?" she asked, her voice cold but tired. "No," he said simply. "Sleep here tonight. Take your time. We'll figure it out tomorrow." Hilary didn't believe him fully. No one gave something for nothing anymore. But her body was too weak to argue. She lay down beside her daughter, the soft bed like heaven after weeks of stone and dirt. Mason dimmed the light and left quietly. Outside, the wind howled again, but the walls held strong. Hilary closed her eyes. Her arm wrapped around Ara. She whispered a quiet thank you to no one in particular, not to the gods, not to fate, just to the warm room, and maybe a little to the human who didn't ask for anything, but deep in her heart, she still wondered. What kind of man helps a stranger, and what will he ask later? The cold bargain was made, but the price was not what she expected. The man with no demands. The next morning, sunlight peeked through the small window. It wasn't real sunlight, just artificial glow from the colony's solar dome. But for Hilary, it was the first light she had seen that didn't mean danger. Her daughter Ara was still asleep beside her, peaceful for once. Hilary sat up slowly, her body sore, but warm. She looked around the small room again. No locks, no chains, no watchers, only quiet. And then the smell of food. She followed it and stepped outside, still cautious. The human man, Mason, stood near a metal stove, cooking some kind of protein. Mix. He noticed her but didn't stare. "You hungry too?" he asked, without looking at her face. Hilary nodded slowly. "Yes, thank you." He passed her a small bowl without another word. No jokes, no offers, no price, just food. She sat at the edge of the fence wall watching the camp. Humans walked by, some in work suits, others with rifles. Some gave her strange looks. One woman even whispered something behind her hand. But no one stopped her. No one pulled her away. Mason finally sat down across from her, his face unreadable. "You can stay for a few days," he said. "But the council might not be happy." "Why not?" Hilary asked. "I haven't hurt anyone." "Because you're not human," he replied. "And they've lost a lot of trust in anything alien." Hilary nodded slowly. "I understand," she said. "Most aliens wouldn't trust humans either." He raised an eyebrow. "But I trusted you." She looked into his eyes. "Why?" Mason didn't answer for a moment. Instead, he looked at the small, sleeping girl behind the glass window. "I guess." "I used to have a sister," he said softly. "She died during the first attacks. Hungry, cold. Just like your daughter looked." Hilary was quiet. This man didn't want her body, her loyalty, or her thanks. He wanted something else, something harder to accept. He wanted nothing at all, and that made her feel even more confused. "Do you want us to leave after a few days?" she asked. Mason looked up. "That's not my call," he said. "But if you want to stay, I'll speak for you." "Why would you risk that?" He gave a short laugh. "Because I've killed enough in this life. Saving 2 lives might balance the scale." Hilary didn't speak after that. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because she realized he wasn't lying. Later that afternoon, Mason took her on a short walk through the colony. He showed her the water recycling units, the crop domes, the sleeping quarters. Everywhere they went, people stared. One human boy even threw a small rock at her feet. "Why is that alien here?" he shouted. "She's a spy!" Mason turned sharply and stared the boy down until he ran off. Then he turned to Hilary. "This won't be easy," he said. "They don't see who you are. They only see what you are." Hilary lowered her head. "I'm used to that," she whispered. He sighed. "You shouldn't be." That night, she stayed in the same room again. Mason gave her a spare coat for Ara and another food packet. Still no demands, no questions. Hilary sat quietly as her daughter ate. "Is that man our new family?" Ara asked suddenly. Hilary froze. "No, child," she said gently. "He's just helping us." Ara smiled sleepily. "Then he's a good man." And just like that, Hilary felt something strange press against her heart. It wasn't love, not yet. But it wasn't fear anymore either. Trust, small and slow, like a flower growing in a frozen land. She wasn't sure what Mason truly wanted from this, but one thing was now clear. He was not like the others, and in a world where kindness was more rare than oxygen, that made him dangerous, because kindness made her want to stay. Whispers, Behind the colony wall was tall, strong, and built to keep danger out. But sometimes the real danger came from within. 3 days had passed since Ilari and Ara entered the human settlement. Ilari spent most of her time helping, quietly, cleaning, sorting supplies, repairing wires. She never asked for pay, only a little food for her child. Mason watched her from a distance. He never ordered her to work, but she chose to repay kindness in the only way she could, but not everyone saw it that way. On the 4th night, in a side corridor behind the food depot, 2 men whispered, "She's spying, I'm telling you." One said, "Lorelians, don't just show up out of nowhere." "She's got a kid," the other replied. "Spies don't carry hungry toddlers." "Maybe the kid is part of it," the first hissed. "Distraction, bait. They get into our walls, then signal the others." They didn't know Mason was around the corner. He had heard every word, and his jaw tightened. The colony was small, and rumors spread like wildfire. By morning, 3 workers had refused to take food from the same table Ilari cleaned. One woman told her to go back to whatever alien pit you crawled out of. Even a child threw a dirty cup at Ara's feet. Ilari didn't fight, didn't shout. She simply held her daughter closer and moved on, but Mason saw the pain in her eyes, and worse, he saw the fear returning. That night, he sat outside her small room, sipping old military coffee. She stepped out quietly, standing next to him without a word. "They're scared of me," she said, not looking at him. "They're scared of anything different," he replied. "Even after all these years. Some humans never learn." "I could leave," she said. "Go back into the wild. Maybe find a ruined Lorelian shelter, sleep under steel beams again." Mason shook his head. "Your daughter won't survive out there." "I know," Ilari whispered. "But if I stay, this colony might turn against you." "I can handle them," he said firmly. Ilari turned to him, eyes sharp. "But can you protect Ara too? Every day? From all of them?" That silence between them was heavy. He couldn't lie. No one could protect a child from every cruel word or cold stare. But he could try. The next morning, Mason did something unexpected. He walked straight to the colony council. 5 leaders, who made decisions on food, trade, and security. He stood before them, armor still dusty from gate duty. "I want Ilari and her daughter granted temporary residency," he said. One of the older women raised her eyebrow. "You're serious?" "She's working without being asked," Mason said. "She hasn't caused a single problem, and her child is quiet, respectful, and recovering." Another council member leaned forward. "She's not human, Mason, and this colony has seen enough alien betrayal." "She's not the enemy," he replied, voice steady. "She's a mother." They argued for 20 minutes, some worried about safety, some about trust, others about setting a bad example, but Mason didn't back down, and finally, they agreed, with one condition. "She must wear an identity tag," one councilman said. "Mark her as non-human guest so people know she's under watch." Mason hated it, but he nodded. It was better than sending her out into the cold again. Later that day, he gave Ilari the small glowing tag. She looked at it silently, then clipped it to her shoulder. No complaint, no emotion, but something in her eyes dimmed a little. Even kindness, it seemed, had limits. That night, as she tucked Ara into bed, Ilari whispered to herself, "This is better. But it's still not home." "Behind the walls," whispers continued. But so did something else. The beginning of change, because even in a broken world, sometimes all it took was one man who refused to turn away, and one woman brave enough to stay. Ara's laughter. For a long time, the colony had been quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from tired people just trying to survive. But one morning, something strange broke that silence. A small sound, soft at first, then brighter. It echoed through the narrow metal halls like a song no one had heard in years. A child's laugh. It was Ara. She stood in the crop dome with her hands deep in the soil, her fingers muddy. One of the auto water pipes had burst slightly, spraying her with cold mist. She jumped, spun, and then started giggling. Ilari gasped and rushed forward, worried at first, but when she saw the laughter on her daughter's face, she froze. Tears touched her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. For the first time in months, Ara was smiling. Mason stood nearby, checking a water sensor. He looked over his shoulder and smiled just a little. He didn't say much, but Ilari knew what he was thinking. This, right here, this was worth more than food or weapons or technology, hope. Later that day, Ara began to follow Mason everywhere. She copied how he walked, how he stood, even how he sipped his tea. She called him Big Human and asked him questions. Nonstop, why is your hair like a bush? Why do humans eat food that smells like rust? Why don't you glow like my mother? Mason didn't mind. He answered what he could and smiled at what he couldn't, but not everyone found it charming. Two men working in the power bay muttered as Ara passed by. That alien brat again, one said. She's gonna break something. Just like her kind broke the galaxy, Ilari heard it. She turned slowly, her expression cold and sharp, but she didn't say a word. She just took Ara's hand and walked away. That night, as Ara fell asleep beside her, Ilari whispered to Mason, I can take her and leave, if we're causing too much trouble. Mason looked tired, but firm. No, he said. She's a light in this place, and the ones who can't see that are already lost. Ilari didn't answer. She looked down at her daughter and gently brushed Ara's hair with her fingers. The next day, something strange happened. An older woman named Lena, who had once shouted at Ilari in the food depot, showed up outside their room with something in her hand, a small plush doll. It had been patched many times and had one button eye missing. She dropped this in the hallway yesterday, Lena said without emotion. Thought she might want it back. Ilari took it slowly. Thank you, she whispered, surprised. Lena didn't smile, but she nodded once and left. Something was changing, slowly, but surely more people began to nod at Ilari in the hall. Some even smiled at Ara when she ran past them. A group of engineers let Ilari join their tool repair shifts, and someone started leaving small food packets outside their door. Without a name, without a note, Ilari didn't forget the hate, but she saw the kindness beginning to grow through the cracks, and it all started with Ara's laugh. One evening, during the colony's weekly light grid maintenance, the power went down for 12 minutes. Everyone sat in darkness, wrapped in blankets, waiting. That's when Ara stood up and said, I'm not scared of the dark because I have Big Human and Mama and my loud giggles. Everyone nearby chuckled. Even the guards smiled. Ilari turned to Mason quietly. You gave her more than food, she said. You gave her childhood again. Mason didn't know how to respond. He just looked at Ara and nodded once. In that moment, Ilari realized something else too. She was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to live again. Maybe, just maybe, this could become home. What the Council hides Zareth 12's colony had metal walls, tall towers, and thick doors, but its real protection came from silence, the kind of silence that hides the truth, keeps secrets buried, and hopes no one ever digs. Ilari had learned to listen, not just with her ears, but with her instincts. She heard the things people didn't say, and lately, too many people were avoiding the east sector of the colony. One afternoon, while helping fix solar panels, Ilari noticed something strange. Two guards were loading sealed crates into a transport drone. Crates that weren't marked for trade or repair. When she asked the supervisor, he changed the subject. Quickly, don't worry about that, he said. Just keep your hands out of the wiring. But her mind didn't let go of it. Later that night, she mentioned it quietly to Mason. Why is the east sector locked down? She asked. I see power lines being pulled there, but no one says why. Mason frowned. That area's under council control only, he said. Even I'm not allowed past the third gate. Hilary didn't ask more, but something in her gut twisted. She had been royalty once. Her people hid secrets too, and she knew the smell of hidden fear. The next day, something worse happened. A worker named Elias collapsed in the water unit. Hilary rushed to help, but the man shoved her away, coughing and angry. You did this, he shouted. I saw your kind use poison before. What did you bring here? The outburst drew a crowd. Hilary stood frozen, unsure whether to run or fight. Mason appeared moments later and calmed the crowd. Back to your duties, he ordered. He's sick from overwork, not alien poison. But the whispers had already started again. That night, Hilary sat with Ara in their room. The lights dimmed low. She watched her daughter sleep and whispered to herself, if something happens, will they blame us first? The next morning, Mason came to her with a tight look on his face. The council is meeting about you, he said. They're saying your presence has caused unrest. They may ask you to leave. Hilary didn't panic. She stood up slowly and said, then let me speak to them before they decide behind closed doors. You sure? Mason asked. They don't like being questioned. Hilary looked him straight in the eye. I've bowed enough in my life, she said. Now I speak. Inside the main council room, 5 humans sat at a steel table. They stared at her with blank expressions. Mason stood by the door silent, ready to support if needed. We gave you shelter, said one man, but your presence has caused tension, even sickness. I did not bring sickness, Hilary replied calmly. I brought my daughter, and she brought laughter, not poison. Another woman tapped a data screen. There have been increased power drains and food packet shortages since you arrived. Hilary stepped forward. And what about the east sector? She asked. What drains power that no one speaks of? Why do guards move crates in the night? The room went still. The council members shifted uncomfortably. That's classified, one said. Not your concern. Hilary's voice stayed, calm but firm. Then don't use me as a shadow to hide your secrets. Blame me if I do wrong. Not when your own walls are shaking. Mason looked at her with quiet pride. She hadn't just defended herself. She'd stood for truth. The council didn't respond at first, but then one of the younger members spoke softly. We will review all movements in the east sector and pause accusations for now. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a door, not shut, but cracked open. Outside the room, Mason nodded to her. You did well, he said. Most humans wouldn't dare talk to them like that. I wasn't. Always a beggar, Hilary replied. Before war took my world, I gave orders too. That night, someone left a fresh fruit pack outside their room. No name, just kindness. And for the first time in weeks, Hilary allowed herself a small smile. Truth had a cost, but silence had cost her people everything. Before, this time, she would not stay silent, and the colony, ready or not, would have to choose what kind of place it wanted to be. The attack in the snow. The cold had teeth that night. Winds howled like wounded beasts beyond the colony's walls. Snow piled high against the fences, sharp like glass. But inside the colony, heaters hummed, lights flickered, and people believed. They were safe. They were wrong. Hilary stood outside her room, her cloak pulled tight. She looked past the gate, into the black distance. Something in the wind felt wrong, too still, too sharp. Her people once lived in frozen lands. She knew when. Nature was silent. It wasn't peace, it was warning. Mason walked past her, adjusting his rifle strap. Can't sleep? He asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward the tree line beyond the outer tower. There, she whispered. Something is watching. Mason followed her gaze. Nothing moved, only the blowing snow. But Mason had learned something. Since meeting her, when Hilary felt danger, it was real. He raised his comm device. "Tower 1, do you see any movement northeast?" The reply came after a pause. "Negative, no signs of movement." "Wait, hold on." Static. Then silence. Mason's eyes narrowed. "Stay inside," he told Hilary. "Lock your door." She didn't move. "Mason," she said softly, "if this is what I think it is, the door won't stop them. Within minutes." The alarm lights turned red. A loud warning rang out. "Not for fire, not for power loss. Breach alert, gate 3. The colony scrambled. Guards grabbed weapons. Civilians ran toward the shelters. Ara woke up crying, clutching her blanket. Hilary swept her up in her arms, moving fast through the chaos. Mason barked orders at the outer wall. "Eyes up! Weapons ready! They're using the snow cover!" Then they came, not human, not Lorelian. Creatures built like wolves but taller than any man, with red eyes and armor made of bones and scrap metal. Scavenger beasts, known across the outer. Systems as bone-eaters, they attacked small colonies, took everything. Food, tech, even bodies. A scream echoed as one guard was dragged over the wall. Mason opened fire, hitting one in the chest. It fell, but 3 more climbed up behind it. Hilary reached the shelter entrance, but it was full. The guards wouldn't open the door again. "No more space! No more!" They shouted. She turned, heart pounding. She couldn't leave Ara outside. Not again. Not ever. Then Mason's voice cut through the air. "Hilary, over here." He waved her toward the communication building. Reinforced walls, backup power, emergency locks. She ran, boots slipping on ice, holding Ara tight against her chest. Inside, Mason sealed the door just as a bone-covered claw slammed into the wall. Ara screamed, but Hilary stayed calm. "Mason," she said, breath heavy. "They're not just attacking for food." He turned. "What do you mean?" She looked him in the eye. "They're smart. They came at night during a storm when power grids are weakest. This wasn't chance. This was planned." Outside, the walls shook. The colony's east sector lost lights, and sparks flew from a broken fence post. Hilary stepped forward. "Give me a weapon," she said. "I can fight." Mason hesitated, but the fire in her eyes left no room for doubt. He handed her a short-range blaster and a knife. "Protect your daughter first," he said. "Then protect us." Hilary nodded. "I was trained for war," she said. "I only stopped because I had something to protect." Together they moved through the halls, clearing corridors, covering frightened civilians. Mason fought with sharp precision, but Hilary moved like wind, silent, deadly, fast. She struck 2 bone-eaters before they even saw her coming. Word spread quickly. "Alien mother's fighting!" someone shouted. "She's saving us!" That night, the colony saw something they had never seen before. A Lorelian warrior standing at the front of the line. Not just a refugee, not a guest, but a protector. By dawn, the bone-eaters fled. They left behind broken claws, scorched armor, and deep claw marks across the colony wall. But they didn't take a single life, because Hilary was there, because Mason believed her, and because even the snow listened when she spoke. No longer a guest. The snow melted slowly in the days that followed, not from the sun. There was no real sun on Zareth 12, but from the fires of repair teams, the warmth of unity, and the heat of something rare. Respect, Hilary stood on top of. The outer wall, cloak flapping in the cold wind. Below her, workers rebuilt the fence, patched up wires, and fixed broken gates. Children played nearby, laughing, running, and Ara was one of them. No one told her to stay inside anymore. No one whispered when she walked past. Now they greeted her, smiled at her. They had seen her mother fight for them, bleed for them. Protect them, Ilari was no longer a stranger. She was a shield. Mason walked up the steps toward her, hands in his pockets. "You don't sleep much, do you?" he said. Ilari gave him a soft smile. "I've learned that peace doesn't last long." "It must be guarded," he nodded. "We're planning a ceremony," he said. "The council wants to give thanks to those who fought during the attack." "I don't need thanks," she replied. "I only wanted to keep my daughter safe." "You did more than that," Mason said. "You kept this place alive." That afternoon, the colony gathered in the main square. For the first time in years, music played, real music. A mix of human tones and Lorellian notes Ilari had shared with the engineers. It was strange, but beautiful. Council members stood on a raised platform. Mason called Ilari forward. At first, she hesitated, her fingers clenched nervously. But Ara's small hand slipped into hers, warm and trusting. "Mama," she whispered, "you're not afraid of anything." Ilari walked to the front, cloak trailing behind her. Gasps and whispers rose from the crowd. "Not fear this time." But Awe, a councilwoman, stepped forward, holding a small metallic badge. "This is the symbol of Citizen Defender," she said. Given to those who risk everything for the good of the colony, Ilari didn't move to take it. She looked at the crowd, then at Mason, and finally at Ara. Then she spoke. "Months ago, I stood outside your walls, asking for food, for shelter. Some of you feared me. Some of you hated me. Most of you did not know me." She paused. "But one man opened the gate without asking for anything. And today, that one kindness became many." She turned back to the council. "I will accept this badge, but only if my daughter gets one too." "She reminded you how to smile." The crowd laughed softly and someone clapped. Then more joined. The councilwoman nodded and held out a second badge, smaller, shaped like a flower. "For Ara," she said, "the youngest light in the dark." Ara held it high above her head like a trophy, giggling. The laughter that once broke silence now filled the entire colony. That night, the colony had its first real celebration in years. Fires were lit in the central courtyard. Humans and aliens danced together. Old fears forgotten, or at least softened. Ilari sat beside Mason near the outer wall. She watched Ara chase a boy around the courtyard with a half-burnt stick, laughing like the world had never hurt her. "She's happy," Ilari said softly. "She's safe." "You both are," Mason replied. "You're not guests anymore." She looked at him, her silver eyes glowing under the stars. "No," she said. "We're home." And for the first time in a long, long time, she believed it. The end.